What's your caught in a NSFW situation at work? The amount of odd porn titles that have come up in my client's search history when I've done tech support is, yeah. I caught a couple of married co-workers going it in the parking lot. They're married, just not to each other. I was a janitor in college dorms. I worked with this 160-something dude with bad legs. One day my supervisor walked in on him pants down jacking it in the janitor closet. The way he tells it, they both locked eyes, then he just turned around and left. I work nights in the reception at a small hotel. Once this older guy came down with his laptop and requested help because he couldn't make his porn work. So I had to update the guy's flash player to make his Filipino porn work. It was a bit awkward, but I'm not gonna deny some old guy his porn. So I fixed his computer and the dude was happy. Walked into the bathroom to see two male co-workers looking at one of their crotches and saying, "Yeah, I'm taking you to the hospital right now." Turns out that the guy being examined was special needs and needed help knowing if he needed medical attention for a nasty skin rash. Turns out that it was just heat rash from wearing really hot clothing during the summer. A little over a decade ago, I was working as a quality assurance tester at Sony. Rather than slogging my way through unfinished video games, though, I was tasked with watching movies that had been released on Blu-ray, making sure that all of their various features functioned as expected when accessed on the PlayStation 3. While that might sound like an amazing job, it was actually less enjoyable than you'd think, both because I didn't get to choose what I watched, and because I'd have to endure repeated viewings for every subtitle track, alternate cut, and ill-conceived piece of commentary that was included on the discs. One day, I was assigned the movie Eyes Wide Shut. If you're unfamiliar with the film, here's what you need to know. Stanley Kubrick was, and still is, famed as being one of the most driven and detail-oriented directors to grace the silver screen. If anyone else had made Eyes Wide Shut, though, critics likely would have decried it as a filmmaker's excuse to surround themselves with dozens of naked women. There's a scene, for example, that's literally just Tom Cruise walking through a graphic orgy. Each person involved is wearing a mask, but nothing else. Anyway, as with any of the films that I was assigned, I had to watch this 1.5 dozen times, at the very least, and given that my desk wasn't the most private of locations, my screen was completely visible to anyone who might happen to pass by. Word quickly got around that I was watching pornography, which prompted my supervisor to approach me from behind. "Max, what are you doing?" he asked. I kept my eyes glued to the screen, but held up the movie's case. "It's Eyes Wide Shut." "Oh." He stood there for a little while, staring, until the manager walked over. "What are you guys watching?" "Eyes Wide Shut," we both said. "Oh." Over the course of about 10 minutes, my desk was slowly surrounded by the entire management team, up to and including the department head. When the orgy scene finally finished, they all glanced around at each other, chuckled, then hurried off to focus on whatever work they had been neglecting. It was something of a relief for me, and not, as you might be thinking, because I didn't like having my superiors crowd around me, but because I had been seated with my head at crotch level for the entire showing. Like I said, I kept my eyes glued to the screen. TLDR, watching pornography at work saw me getting surrounded by. For a while I was sort of dating our secretary. One day after work, after everyone had gone home, she came into my office and we ended up having a great time on my desk. About halfway through I picked her up and pushed her against the glazed glass wall of my office while she was straddling me. After I got tired, she turned around facing the glass and we continued until I finished. I had forgotten about the security cameras in the hallways and entrance. About 3 days later I get to work, and there is a DVD plus R on my desk, with a note, "Hope you had fun," and it was of a camera that points almost directly at my office, because it is on a corner. You could a lot more than I thought you could through those glazed windows. Security guys are either blackmailing me or a bro. The walk-in freezer at the Papa John's in Alamogordo NM is a dirty place. I wasn't the only person busted with another pizza delivery person doing NSFW things. But the Domino's freezer in that town isn't any cleaner. Edit. Okay, so the story of this is, One of the weather forecasters at Holloman AFB met the manager of the PJs one night at a bar and ended up with a job as a delivery driver while he delivered something else to the manager on the side. We were all pretty poor in the weather shop and the shop manager okayed it, so more of us got hired delivering when we weren't forecasting. One of the delivery girls was really hot and liked me too, so that became a thing. One night, the manager and her BF were closing the shop and my GF and I were just about to get off shift. We got back from different deliveries at the same time and got ourselves all worked up in the parking lot before we went inside to cash out. The manager was in her office, on her desk, with her boyfriend in there too, pants around his ankles. So we couldn't cash out and didn't want to go into the backseat of her Cavalier, so we went into the freezer. The manager came in about 10 minutes later and tried to pretend that she hadn't just been doing the same thing. We cashed out, went home, and had more fun while we ate some breadsticks. I don't know if this counts, but I worked for a call center a couple years ago, and when we asked someone their name we had to say, "And who do I have the pleasure of speaking with today?" Well, for some king reason why, I have no idea, I asked the lady on the phone, "And who do I have the pleasure of sleeping with today?" The girl who sits next to me looked at me wide-eyed, and then I realized what I said and apologized profusely. The lady on the phone just started cracking up, and then told me her name was Miran. Edit. To answer the important question, I'm sorry to say I did not sleep with Miran. Also, thanks for the silver kind friend. Back in the early 2000s there was a NSFW prank floating around the internet. If you clicked it, a looping video of two guys going at it popped up on your screen and the PC speaker squawked, "Hey everybody, I'm watching gay porn." That wasn't the worst of it. If you tried to close the browser it spawned two more, and kept spawning more. If you closed those, I worked in it, and thought it was a hilarious prank, so I sent it to my supervisor in an email titled, "Important System Update." We always played practical jokes on each other and this would have just been par for the course. Only problem is he thought it was legit, and sent it to the whole floor. My horror when only a few moments later I hear it playing on one PC, then another. Almost everyone in the office had clicked the link. People panicked, turned off their systems, losing all their work. It was a huge show. Believe it or not, I never got fired, and actually got promoted a year later. Not me, but a past co-worker, we'll call him Bob Smith. He had logged into a shared computer in our lab one day, and he pulled up Outlook, and then turned around to do something with his phone while Outlook loaded. Well, let me tell you, our corporate mail filter failed that day. I walk in to see Bob turned away from the screen, and on the screen, in the Outlook preview pane, nearly full screened, was an email. In huge letter, "Bob Smith, are you getting enough big black dick?" And of course, this lovely email was accompanied by a picture showing exactly what they were talking about, just in case you were unsure. I try to suppress a laugh, and just say to him, "Well, Bob, are you?" He looked at me, "Am I what? What are you talking about?" I point to the screen. He can't hit that delete button fast enough. The words "well, are you," with no further context for anyone else overhearing, became a running joke between us. Used to be a lifeguard and decided to take a break to walk the dog in the bathroom. Only had some family bathrooms, not really any men or women designated areas. So I sit down and whip out the old mobile device and start yanking the chain, when all of a sudden the door begins to open up and a younger dad who doesn't know how to knock, my fault I didn't lock it, decides that he is gonna walk right in. He then looks at me as I've got my dick in one hand and my phone in the other, and turns to his wife, who couldn't see me, and says, "Let's not use this one, it's pretty dirty." He backed out and closed the door. I have never felt so relieved, but so traumatized and a little mad. Mostly because he called me dirty lol. At my last job, there was this deaf guy who was nonverbal. The company brought in an ASL translator for every meeting, which was the only time you could really interact with him face to face. Honestly a stand-up guy though. One day I'm in the washroom taking a dump, and I hear something strange in the stall next to me. The steady schlick 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 of someone jerking off. Then some grunting. So I finished up quick and left the washroom. It was just me and the masturbator in there. I checked his shoes, then stood outside and pretended to be on the phone. Turns out it was the deaf guy. I just smiled and waved when I saw him. From then on, I noticed that he went to the washroom for a suspiciously long time every day. I guess nobody told him that masturbating makes noise. Telling my friend's story, with her permission of course. My friend had a big interview this day. She studied nutrition in college and was interviewing with a hospital in Boston to work on their dietetics team. She went to the interview and met with the hospital worker, sat down and chatted for a bit. It was going well, so the interviewer asked if she wanted a tour of the area of the hospital she would be working in. She agreed, and the hospital was beautiful, but the interviewer seemed a bit awkward during the tour. She figured this was their way of politely ending the interview when they weren't interested, and tried to brush the awkwardness off and compensate by being more energetic, which only seemed to make the interviewer even more awkward. Finally, at the end of the tour, when she was leaving, the interviewer admitted that she had a lovely sweater, but there was a lacy black thong stuck to her back from static. She had been parading around the hospital trying to talk herself up, all the while walking around with a thong displayed for all to see. Needless to say, she didn't end up working there, and to this day jokes about how, if she's ever dying, and we need to send her to a hospital, how she'd rather die than be admitted there. Only got caught peripherally in this one. One of my IT guys assigned to one of our regional offices kept getting help requests from one clerical, and most of the problems were questionable at best. She obviously just wanted to see him. One day he gets a call and goes up to her cubicle and she's standing there with her pants off. He backed out of that, put her on his do not respond list until things could get straightened out, and then called me for help, since nothing he had done was working. Since she wasn't my employee, I picked up the phone and called the regional director. The initial contact was something like, "Hi, regional. First name basis, you know, I've always supported casual Fridays, but don't you think no pants Fridays are a little too much?" Later edit. 1. Makes no difference what the woman looked like, or the guy for that matter. Knowing the guy in question, he would have been deeply offended and upset whether she was Miss Universe or Godzilla's spawn. Simply not germane. 2. We had another similar instance a few years later with the genders reversed. The consequences were the same. Paperwork in the file and the employee soon leaving in shame. 3. I probably should have indicated that this was more than 3 decades ago when consequences for this sort of offensive conduct were on a different scale than now. Not me, but a close friend. He worked as a vet tech, cleaning kennels, walking the dogs, changing bandages, etc. He was good friends with the boss lady and she would bring her shepherd mix pups to stay in the kennel some weekends, especially if she was out of town or busy. One Sunday morning he ran up to take care of the animals and the pups were there. They loved to play, so after cleaning and caring for the other animals, he went into their run and was tossing the ball and roughhousing with these 2 dogs. One dog jumped on him from behind and its paw slid into his front pocket, pulling down his pants. Right at this moment, with his pants around his ankles, one dog in front waiting, and the other behind him, he realized that maybe today was not the day to go commando, especially as his boss walks in at that precise moment to see him, with her beloved puppers, hanging out in all his glory. He called me when he got home laughing and crying. His boss simply took the dogs and walked out without saying a word. Fortunately, it wasn't a rom-com movie, so he was able to explain the next day. Her only comment was, "Let's remember to wear underwear from now on, okay?"